Hello, you beautiful people. Today we are talking about what it's like being an expat and the hardships that come along with it. Now, first and foremost, the big disclaimer is I am an expat in Peru, not in Europe, not anywhere else. So these problems are probably going to apply to specifically people that want to move to a third world country and be an expat, and a rural one at that. So, for example, and the second disclaimer is if I was to be in Lima, which is the biggest city in Peru to my knowledge, these problems would probably be different than they are in the Sacred Valley. And the third disclaimer is I love what I do. I love living here. So just because I'm saying these problems, don't take it for the fact that I don't like it here, because I absolutely love it here. But I just thought I'd talk about it because they are real prevalent problems that I experience on a regular basis. So the first one, which is somewhat easy to get around, just with a little planning and forethought and planning, is the access to things. Now, anything you need is here. Blenders, which you really don't even need, stoves, gas, water, any of that you have access to. But in the US or in other Western countries, you might have access to certain appliances that you just can't count on here. So one good example, I went to a gathering recently, and the woman makes juices and amazing food, but she makes juices, and she's really looking to get a cold press machine. Now, there's not really cold press machines here. The ones they do have break very easily, and they're not good for constant output. So let's say you wanted to open up a juice shop, for example, you would probably have to use a blender because the cold press that you need isn't here. Now you can get it, you can order it, it costs a little more and you have to order it in a little bit in advance. However, if you like being able to go to the store and just go pick up whatever it is that you want and come home with it and be able to have every appliance that you could ever dream of, moving to a third world country is probably not going to be your best bet. I know probably a lot of you are like, no, duh. Like, of course, that's how it is. But it is something to consider that you might not have thought of, because sometimes even the things that you think are going to be relatively easy to come by are not. Like, there are toasters here, but I haven't seen very many of them. I'd probably have to go on a hunt to find one. So if you like toasting bread every morning, it's going to be a little bit of a pain. So that's kind of the first issue when it comes to everything. Like I said, not a big problem, very easy to fix, but problem nonetheless. The next issue that I face pretty regularly is friends and groups. Now, there is a community of people who speak English here, and I can make friends with those people and all of that, but friends are a bit more difficult to come by. You come across people in the same situation, which is really cool, but it really lacks that really diverse perspective. The locals, of course, you make friends with the locals as time goes on, and they have their own unique perspective as well. But it's kind of like sometimes for example, I speak Spanish, but I don't want to speak Spanish all the time. I want to have a few friends that speak English. And you could be like, well, if you didn't want to speak Spanish all the time, then you shouldn't have moved to a Spanish speaking country. And you are right, sir. Right on the money. But I don't mind it so much. But it is something that I experience. I wish I had a few more friends that spoke English or were from the US or Europe or something like that, just to kind of like, and I could do that online, but it is something to consider. If you're moving somewhere that is out of the way, I'm lucky enough to be in a place that isn't so much out of the way. A lot of people pass through to go to Machu Picchu, so I meet a lot of people that way. However, when you're moving, keep in mind that your situation will be interesting and it will be different from many of the people that surround you. So, finding friends that are in a similar situation can be difficult. And once you do find friends that are in a similar situation, their mindsets can be very similar to yours. And maybe you like that, maybe you don't. I tend to like to have friends that are wide varying in mindsets, and that's a bit difficult for me to find here. So, again, not a problem, just something that I've experienced that I thought I should talk about and bring up to you guys. And the last thing, which I think is the biggest thing and is not avoidable, and it's just gonna happen when you go to another country, I really miss my culture. And maybe a lot of people would say Americans don't really have culture, but there's kind of like a body language, a way of speaking, a way of like word choice that even when I meet a lot of Europeans here, wonderful people to talk to. I really miss that American culture, the West Coast and East Coast differences, all that stuff. just the way of doing things. I don't necessarily want it all the time, and if I did, I'd move back to the US. However, you do kind of miss your culture when you're outside of. I don't feel like a fish out of water, but have you ever seen one of those fish that can like breathe air? So they get into the mud and they swim across, and then they kind of eventually end back up in the water. That's essentially how I feel as an expat out here with my culture. Like I'm kind of like dancing across the mud with their culture, and I really enjoy the Peruvian culture. It's an amazing like collection of arts and music and food and just everything. Like I love it, but it's hard not to miss the things that you're comfortable with. And I do wish that I had a little bit more of that. I could connect with some people online as usual, but it's really that like in-person feel of being around someone that is similar to you. I could always go to Cusco and probably find it. So it's not like any of these things are out of reach, but I'm talking more on the day to day. For those of you that are thinking about potentially moving to Peru at some point or another third world country or even staying for like 3, 4 months or something because you have an off season at work, it's just important to take into account the things that are kind of difficult. There are others, but those are the big ones that seem to impact me the most. Some other small ones is kind of on this along the same lines with the culture. There's some cultural things that I don't fully understand, and not in the way like that they shouldn't be doing it, but like I'm not sure how to interact with the situation. So I kind of find myself withdrawing from the situation and watching and trying to figure out what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. And I have some friends here that are locals that explain it to me, but I also don't want to ask them about every little thing that I don't fully understand about the culture because that's, I'm sure they're happy to explain, but I don't really want to overwhelm them with that. And I think the next very specific thing is the difference in work culture. Now, I would say the U.S. has a rather toxic relationship with work. Not everyone in it, but as a whole, it's very much work 40 to 80 hours a week, put all your time into it until you retire, and then go home and hope when you retire and hope you had saved enough to make it to when you die and pay for your funeral and give some to your kids. That's essentially what I get from the normal American dream culture that we have going on there. Here, the work culture is a little bit different and it's kind of hard not to fall into it. It's very much like everything I need comes from the land. I don't really have to worry about much. So I'm not saying they're not hard workers. That's not at all the case. They work very hard, but it's just this kind of relationship with wealth. And maybe that is also because it's a third world country. Because there's even, I've lived in some very poor areas in the United States and it had a similar feel where it's kind of like, I'm not going to work to get my head above water to the point where I don't have to worry about anything because it's just never going to happen. So I'm just going to keep trying to tread. That's my goal. Just tread as best I can and make it to the end, you know? Um, but I feel like that's in the US too nowadays. People have this dream of wanting to have a bunch of money and realizing the housing market and the taxes and all that stuff is so messed up that it's just not going to happen without some special lucky circumstances. So I'm not saying that it's different per se, but just things that I've noticed. If you guys have any questions about Peru or what it's like living as as an expat in a third world country, feel free to comment down below. Otherwise, YouTube thinks this video is perfect for you. And if you want to see my other stuff as I make it along the way and experience new things, I have a few things that you guys requested that I'm working on currently. Right here is going to be the button. It's a nice little subscribe button. It will let you find me in the midst and the sea of YouTube videos so we can meet again. Otherwise, I will see you soon.